The coldest man in Silicon Valley, Damian Cross, stared out from the 40th floor of Cross Technologies, watching the San Francisco fog roll across the bay like a gray blanket. His reflection in the glass showed a man who looked older than his 34 years, sharp jaw, piercing blue eyes, and an expression that could freeze water. People whispered that he had ice instead of blood running through his veins. They were not entirely wrong. Rebecca Walsh, executive assistant of 7 years, knocked softly before entering his office. She had learned long ago that surprising Damian Cross was a mistake nobody made twice. "The Henderson file is ready for your signature," she said, placing the folder on his desk with careful precision. "The acquisition will be finalized by end of day." Damian did not look up from his computer screen. "Good. Make sure their entire staff receives termination notices by 5 o'clock. I want them out before the weekend." Rebecca hesitated. That pause, barely a heartbeat long, made Damian finally lift his gaze. "Problem?" His voice was sharp as winter wind. "Oh, sir. It's just that Henderson's is a family business. They have 32 employees, many who have been there for decades, and now they will be somewhere else." Damian returned to his screen. That will be all. When Rebecca left, closing the door with a soft click, Damian allowed himself a moment of something that might have been guilt, but only a moment. Sentiment was for weak people. His father had taught him that lesson well before abandoning the family when Damian was 12. "Never let them see you care," his father had said on his way out the door. "The moment you show weakness, they destroy you." Damian had built his empire on that principle. Cross Technologies had grown from a small startup to a billion-dollar corporation in just 8 years. He acquired struggling companies, gutted them, and absorbed their valuable assets. It was business. It was survival. His phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan Hayes. His biggest competitor and the closest thing he had to a rival. "I heard about Henderson's. You really are heartless. Cross. See you at the board meeting tonight." Damian smiled without warmth. Hayes was old money, born into success, and had never understood what it meant to claw your way up from nothing. Tonight's meeting would determine who got the contract with Pacific Industries, a deal worth $200 million. Hayes thought he had it locked down. He was about to learn otherwise. The meeting changed everything. The conference room at the Pacific Industries headquarters hummed with tension. 20 board members sat around a massive oak table, their faces carefully neutral as they listened to presentations. Jonathan Hayes had gone first, offering a partnership model that emphasized long-term stability and ethical business practices. When Damian's turn came, he stood with the confidence of a man who had never lost. "Gentlemen and ladies," he began, his voice smooth and assured, "Mr. Hayes offers you comfort. I offer you results. Cross Technologies has doubled revenue for every company we have partnered with. We do not waste time on sentiment. We focus on profit." Click through his presentation, each slide showing graphs that climbed steadily upward. Numbers did not lie. Numbers did not judge. Numbers were the only truth that mattered. Choose us, and in 3 years, Pacific Industries will dominate your market sector. Choose Hayes, and you will be having the same conversation with another company, wondering why growth has stalled. The board members exchanged glances. Damian could see the calculation in their eyes. They wanted success. They wanted growth. They wanted what he promised. "We will take a vote next week," announced the board chairman. "Thank you both for your presentations." As the meeting ended, Damian felt a familiar rush of satisfaction. He had one. He could see it in their faces, the way they avoided Hayes' disappointed gaze. But as he stood to leave, the room tilted. The fall of the conference room spun like a carousel. Damian gripped the edge of the table, but his fingers seemed unable to hold on. The expensive carpet rushed up to meet him. And the last thing he heard before darkness took him was Rebecca's voice, sharp with panic. "Someone call an ambulance?" When Damian opened his eyes, harsh fluorescent lights stabbed into his vision. The smell of antiseptic filled his nose. Hospital. He was in a hospital. Machines beeped steadily beside him, monitoring vital signs he had been ignoring for months. "Welcome back to the land of the living," said a warm voice. Damian turned his head. which felt like it weighed 100 pounds. A woman stood beside his bed, not a nurse or doctor, but someone in regular clothes. She wore jeans and a simple green sweater that matched her eyes. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she held a clipboard. "Who are you?" Damien's voice came out rough, like sandpaper. "Grace Winters. I'm a volunteer here. The doctor will be in soon, but I wanted to check if you needed anything. Water? Extra blanket? I need to leave." Grace's smile did not falter. "I hear that a lot. But according to your chart, you collapsed from extreme exhaustion and dehydration. Your body is telling you something important. Maybe you should listen." Damien tried to sit up, but dizziness forced him back down. "I have a meeting in 2 hours. No, you have a hospital bed for the next 24 hours minimum. Doctor's orders." Grace poured water into a plastic cup and held it out to him. "Drink this." Small sips. He wanted to refuse, to assert control over the situation that had spiraled completely out of his grasp. But his throat felt like the Sahara Desert, so he took the cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he noticed her hands were warm. Why did he notice that? "You're Damien Cross?" Grace said. Not quite a question. "Yes. I know who you are. Your company acquired Mitchell's Electronics last year. My friend Amy worked there for 15 years. She lost her job 2 days before Christmas." Damien set down the cup. "Business is not personal. That's what people say when they do not want to feel guilty about hurting others." Grace's voice remained gentle, but her words cut deeper than any hostile takeover negotiation. "Amy has 3 kids. She spent Christmas Eve explaining to them why there would not be many presents that year. I did not make her lose her job. The company was failing, could have kept the staff. You chose not to." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Damien expected anger, accusation, hatred, but Grace's green eyes held something far more unsettling. They held sadness and understanding, as if she could see straight through his carefully built walls to the scared 12-year-old boy who watched his father walk away. "Why are you here?" Damien asked. "If you hate what I do, why volunteer to help me?" Grace smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Mr. Cross. Even people who forget how to show it to others." She adjusted his pillow, checked the monitors, and made a note on her clipboard. "The doctor should be here within the hour. Rest. Your empire will survive 1 day without you." As she walked toward the door, Damien heard himself say, "Thank you." Grace paused, turning back with raised eyebrows. "You're welcome? See? That was not so hard." After she left, Damien lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles. His phone buzzed constantly with messages and emails, but he did not reach for it. For the first time in years, he thought about Amy from Mitchell's Electronics, about her 3 kids. About Christmas Eve, he thought about 32 families at Henderson's, who would receive termination notices by 5 o'clock. He thought about Grace's warm hands and sad, understanding eyes, and for reasons he could not explain, Damien Cross, the coldest man in Silicon Valley, felt something crack inside his chest. Not much, just a hairline fracture in the ice. But it was a start. The diagnosis DAR. Raymond Foster was a no-nonsense physician in his 50s who had seen every type of patient imaginable. He reviewed Damien's charts with practiced efficiency while Rebecca stood anxiously in the corner of the hospital room. "Mr. Cross, your body has been running on fumes," Dr. Foster said bluntly. "When was the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Ate a proper meal? Took a day off?" Damien could not remember. Weeks? Months? "You are 34 years old with the stress markers of someone 20 years older. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. You are severely dehydrated. If you continue like this, you are headed for a heart attack before 40. "I will take some time off," Damien said automatically. "Will you?" Dr. Foster closed the chart. "People like you always say that. Then you are back in the office within 48 hours, working 16-hour days. I am recommending mandatory rest for 2 weeks minimum. No computer, no phone calls, no business. That is impossible. Then prepare to make it permanent. Your choice, Mr. Cross." After the doctor left, Rebecca approached the bed cautiously. "Damien, maybe you should listen to him. The Pacific deal can wait. I can handle the Henderson acquisition." "Cancel the terminations," Damien heard himself say. Rebecca froze. "What, the Henderson employees?" "Keep them on for 90 days. Give them severance packages. Help them find new positions." "Are you sure?" "That will cost us. I know what it will cost." Damien closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Just do it. When Rebecca left, looking thoroughly confused, Damien wondered what Grace Winters would think of that decision. Then he wondered why he cared what she thought at all. The Ice King was beginning to melt, though he did not know it yet. An unexpected visitor. 3 days had passed since Damien's collapse, and he remained under hospital observation despite his protests. The mandatory rest felt like torture for a man who had spent every waking moment building his empire. His laptop sat locked in Rebecca's office, his phone restricted to emergency calls only, and he found himself staring at the hospital room walls with nothing but his thoughts for company. Those thoughts were dangerous territory. Grace Winters appeared each morning with the sunrise, bringing fresh flowers and conversation that Damien never asked for but found himself anticipating. She talked about her work at the community center, about the families she helped, about small victories that meant nothing in the business world but somehow felt significant when she described them. "There's this little girl, Emma," Grace said on the 4th morning, arranging daisies in a vase beside his bed. 7 years old. Her mom works 2 jobs just to keep their apartment. Emma comes to the center after school, and yesterday she read an entire book by herself for the first time. You should have seen her face light up. "That's nice," Damien said, meaning it more than he expected. Grace studied him with those perceptive green eyes. "You look better. Less like a corporate zombie, more like an actual human being." "Gee, thanks. Serious. You have color in your face now. When they brought you in, you looked gray." She sat in the chair beside his bed, something she had started doing instead of just standing. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Can I stop you?" "Probably not," Grace smiled. "Why do you do it?" "The hostile takeovers, the job cuts, all of it. Is the money really worth it?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. Nobody had asked him that question before. They asked about strategies, profit margins, market positioning, but never why. "My father left when I was 12, he heard himself say. "Just walked out one day. Left my mother with nothing but debt and broken promises. I watched her work 3 jobs, watched her cry when she thought I was asleep, watched her age 20 years in 5. Grace listened without interrupting, her expression soft with compassion. "I promised myself I would never be vulnerable like that. Never depend on anyone. Never let emotions cloud business decisions." Damien looked at his hands. Money means security. Power means control. If you're on top, nobody can hurt you. "But you're hurting yourself," Grace said gently. "That's why you're in this hospital bed." Before Damien could respond, a man appeared in the doorway. He was in his 60s, thin, with gray hair and eyes that widened in recognition when they landed on Damien. "Grace, honey. I brought the books you wanted for it." The man stopped mid-sentence. Grace stood quickly. "Dad, this is Damien Cross. Damien, this is my father, Thomas Winters." The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Winters. Thomas Winters had owned Winters Manufacturing, a mid-sized company that Cross Technologies had acquired 2 years ago. Damien remembered the deal clearly because Winters had fought harder than most. Trying to save his employees' jobs, Damien had crushed him anyway. Facing the past, Thomas Winters stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through shock, recognition, and something darker. The books in his arms trembled slightly. "You," Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're the man who destroyed my company." Grace moved toward her father, touching his arm gently. "Dad, I didn't know he would be here today." "Winters Manufacturing," Damien said, forcing himself to meet the older man's gaze. 2 years ago? You remember?" Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course you remember. It was just another Tuesday for you, wasn't it? Another company absorbed. Another group of people's lives ruined. Dad, please, no, Grace. This man needs to hear this. Thomas stepped into the room, his hands clenching into fists around the books. I built that company over 30 years. 30 years of 16-hour days, of missing my daughter's school plays and birthday parties, all to create something that employed 200 people. People with families. People with dreams. Damien said nothing. What could he say? You bought us out for parts, kept the patents, sold the equipment, fired everyone. Do you know what happened to Bill Henderson? 23 years with my company. He had a heart attack 6 months after losing his job. Or Jenny Rodriguez, single mother of 2. Last I heard, she was working 3 part-time jobs just to pay rent. Each name was a hammer blow. Damien had never thought about them as individuals, as people with stories. They had been line items on a spreadsheet, necessary casualties of business strategy. Mr. Winters, Damien started, but the older man held up his hand. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your excuses. I just want you to understand something. Thomas's voice cracked. That company was my legacy. It was supposed to be my daughter's future. You took that away like it meant nothing. Grace's eyes were wet with tears she was trying to hold back. Dad, let's go. This isn't helping. But Thomas wasn't finished. After you destroyed my company, I lost everything. My house, my savings, my sense of purpose. I spent 6 months in a depression so deep I couldn't get out of bed. He looked at Grace with such love it made Damien's chest ache. My daughter is the only reason I'm still here. She saved my life when I had given up on everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Damien wanted to defend himself, to explain the business logic, the market forces, the competitive necessity. But every justification died on his tongue. I'm sorry, Damien said finally, the words feeling inadequate and small. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry for the pain I caused. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught facing the consequences? Both, probably, Damien admitted. But sitting in this hospital bed, hearing about Amy from Mitchell's Electronics and her 3 kids, hearing about your employees, actually seeing you as a real person instead of a name on a contract, he paused. Struggling to articulate feelings he had spent years suppressing. I'm starting to understand the cost of my choices.
Ow.
Understanding isn't enough, Thomas said. What matters is what you do with that understanding. With that, the older man turned and left, his shoulders bent under the weight of memories. Grace lingered, torn between following her father and staying. I should have told you, she said quietly. About my dad, why didn't you? Because I wanted to see if you were capable of basic human kindness without knowing the connection. I wanted to believe that somewhere under all that ice there was a decent person. She wiped her eyes. Was I wrong? Damien thought about the question seriously. Was there a decent person under his carefully constructed armor? Or had he become exactly what his father had warned against, someone so focused on not being vulnerable that he had lost his humanity entirely? I don't know, he answered honestly. But I would like to find out. Grace nodded slowly. Then prove it. Don't just apologize. Do something that actually makes a difference. She left before he could respond, leaving Damien alone with his thoughts and the ghost of Thomas. Winters' words echoing in his mind. The community center 2 days later. Against Dr. Foster's recommendations, but with his grudging permission, Damien left the hospital. But instead of returning to his penthouse or his office, he found himself standing outside the Riverside Community Center, in one of San Francisco's poorest neighborhoods. The building was old but well-maintained, with colorful murals painted on the walls and children's laughter spilling through open windows. A handmade sign announced afternoon tutoring sessions and free meals for families in need. This was where Grace spent her time when she wasn't volunteering at the hospital. Damien took a deep breath and walked inside. The reception area was cramped but welcoming, with donated furniture and walls covered in children's artwork. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind a desk cluttered with papers and smiled warmly. Can I help you? I'm looking for Grace Winters. She's in the reading room with the kids. Down the hall, second door on the left. The woman paused, studying him more closely. Wait, are you Damien Cross? Here it comes, Damien thought. The recognition, the judgment. But the woman just laughed. Grace said, "You might show up. I'm Patricia Monroe, the director here. Welcome to Organized Chaos." The reading room was exactly as chaotic as promised. 15 children of various ages sat on cushions and donated couches, each with a book, while Grace moved between them, helping with difficult words. She wore jeans and an old sweater, her hair in that familiar ponytail, looking more relaxed and happy than anyone Damien had ever seen in his office. She noticed him standing in the doorway, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Cross? What are you doing here? You said to do something that makes a difference." He felt awkward and out of place in his expensive suit among the worn furniture and children in second-hand clothes. "I thought maybe you could show me how." One of the children, a little girl with pigtails and bright, curious eyes, tugged on Grace's sleeve. "Is that your boyfriend?" "No, Emma, this is just a friend." Grace's cheeks flushed pink. "Everyone, this is Mr. Cross. He's going to be volunteering with us today." The children regarded him with the frank assessment that only kids can manage. One boy, maybe 10 years old, raised his hand. "Yes, Marcus," Grace said. "Are you rich?" "Marcus." Grace looked mortified, but Damien found himself smiling for what felt like the first time in years. "Yes," he answered honestly. "I am." "Cool. Can you buy us new books?" "Ours are super old." "Marcus, that's not polite, actually," Damien interrupted. "That's a great idea. What kind of books do you like?" For the next 4 hours, Damien Cross did something he had never done before. He sat on the floor with children, helping them sound out words. He listened to Emma read her book about a brave little mouse. He learned that Marcus wanted to be a scientist, that Sophie dreamed of being a veterinarian, and that Carlos was worried because his dad had lost his job during a break. Grace brought him coffee in a chipped mug. "You're good with them," she said. Surprise evident in her voice. "I'm terrified," Damien admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "That's what makes it good. You're not trying to control everything. You're just being present." Grace sat beside him on the worn couch. "Why did you really come here?" Damien watched Emma showing her book to another girl, her face glowing with pride. "Your father was right. Understanding isn't enough. I've spent years making decisions that hurt people, and I told myself it was just business. But it's not just business. It's lives. It's families. It's little girls who need books and little boys who want to be scientists." He turned to Grace. "I can't undo what I've done, but maybe I can start making different choices going forward." "That sounds like the beginning of something good," Grace said softly. "I wouldn't go that far. I'm still trying to figure out who I am without the armor." Damien smiled ruefully. "It's terrifying. Growth usually is." Calvin Rhodes, Damien's younger brother and the only family he still spoke to, called that evening as Damien was leaving the community center. "Are you insane?" Calvin's voice was sharp with concern. "Rebecca told me you canceled the Henderson firings and disappeared to some community center. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Hayes is telling everyone you've had a mental breakdown." "Maybe I have," Damien said, watching Grace help families pack up to leave. "Or maybe I'm finally becoming sane." "Damien, you're scaring me." "This isn't like you." "No, it's not." The old me would be at the office right now, crushing Hayes and planning the next acquisition, but the old me ended up in a hospital bed. Calvin was quiet for a moment. "What happened to you?" "I met someone who showed me kindness when I didn't deserve it. Then I met the man whose life I ruined. And today I met kids who reminded me that business decisions have real consequences." Damien leaned against his car. "I'm tired, Calvin. Tired of being cold. Tired of being alone. Tired of winning battles and losing everything that matters. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. But whatever it is, it's going to be different." After hanging up, Damien found Grace waiting by her beat-up Honda. "Thank you for today," she said. "The kids loved you. Marcus hasn't stopped talking about the scientist you promised to introduce him to." I meant it. I know someone at Stanford who would love to show him the lab.
What?
Damien hesitated. Grace, I need to ask you something. Why are you helping me? After what I did to your father, you have every reason to hate me. Grace looked up at the darkening sky before answering. My father taught me something important. He said that hate only hurts the person carrying it. It doesn't change the past, and it poisons the future. She met his gaze. I saw something in you that first day in the hospital. Behind all that ice and armor, I saw someone who was lost and hurting. I thought maybe if someone showed you a different way, you might find your way home. Home, Damien repeated. I don't even know what that means anymore. Then let's figure it out together. Damien stood in the parking lot of the Riverside Community Center, feeling something shift inside him. The ice wasn't just cracking anymore. It was melting, and underneath, he was starting to discover a person he had forgotten existed. The person he might have been if his father hadn't left. If he hadn't built walls so high, nobody could reach him. The person Grace seemed to believe he could still become. The board's ultimatum. Emergency board meeting at Cross Technologies felt like facing a firing squad. Damien sat at the head of the massive conference table, surrounded by 12 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to hostile. Rebecca stood by the door. Looking like she wanted to flee, Jonathan Hayes sat across from Damien with an expression of barely concealed satisfaction. Let's address the elephant in the room, said Douglas Freeman, the board chairman and a venture capitalist who had backed Damien since the beginning. You've been acting erratically for 2 weeks. Canceling acquisitions, providing severance packages we didn't budget for, and apparently spending your recovery time at a community center instead of preparing for the Pacific deal. I've been reevaluating our business model, Damien said calmly. Reevaluating? Hayes leaned forward. You mean abandoning everything that made this company successful? Damien, we're predators. That's how we survive in this market. You're acting like prey. No, I'm acting like a human being. The room went silent. Angela Torres, the CFO, and one of the few people Damien considered an ally, cleared her throat. Damien, we understand you've been under stress. Perhaps some time off. I don't need time off. I need this company to change direction. Change direction. Douglas's voice rose. We're on track for record profits. The Pacific deal alone will net us $200 million. What exactly do you want to change? Damien stood, pulling up a presentation he had spent 3 nights preparing. The first slide showed photographs of real people, former employees of companies Cross Technologies had acquired. These are the faces behind our profit margins. Bill Henderson, heart attack at 52, 6 months after we fired him. Jenny Rodriguez, working 3 jobs to support her children after we eliminated her position. Thomas Winters lost everything, including his sense of purpose, when we destroyed his company. Hayes scoffed. So you're going to throw away a billion-dollar empire because you feel guilty? No, I'm going to transform it into something sustainable and ethical. We can still be profitable without destroying lives. Damien clicked to the next slide showing his new proposal. I want Cross Technologies to become a company that acquires struggling businesses and actually helps them succeed. Keep employees, invest in innovation, build partnerships instead of conquering territories. The board members exchanged glances. That's naive, Hayes said flatly. In 2 years, you'll be bankrupt. Or we'll be industry leaders in ethical business practices. Companies that treat people well have lower turnover, higher productivity, and better public perception. It's not just more or less smart business. Douglas studied the presentation carefully. This is a complete paradigm shift. You're asking us to trust that compassion can be as profitable as ruthlessness. I'm asking you to trust that there's a better way, one that doesn't require me to have a heart attack before 40 or look in the mirror and hate who I've become. Angela spoke up quietly. I've reviewed his proposal in detail. It's risky, but financially sound. The initial costs are high, but the long-term projections are actually impressive. You're supporting this madness? Hayes demanded. Every industry evolves. Maybe it's time we evolve too. The vote was called. 6 board members voted to give Damien 6 months to prove his new model. 5 voted against. 1 abstained. It was enough. Hayes stood abruptly. You're making a mistake. I'll be here to pick up the pieces when this experiment fails. He looked at Damien with something almost like pity. You've gone soft, Cross. In 6 months, you'll be finished. After the meeting, Rebecca approached Damien cautiously. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen you do, she said. Probably both. Damien gathered his materials. Rebecca, I need you to set up meetings with every company we've acquired in the past 5 years. I want to talk to former employees, assess damage, see what we can repair. That's going to take months, and we better start today. Making amends, the first person Damien met was Helen Cross, his mother. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since an argument about his business practices that ended with her saying she didn't recognize her son anymore. She lived in a modest apartment in Oakland, working as a librarian despite the money Damien sent her monthly money. She always returned uncashed. When Helen opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. Damien. Hi, Mom. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Helen pulled him into a fierce hug. She was smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he had just forgotten how to see her clearly. Come in, she said, wiping her eyes. I'll make tea. Her apartment was filled with books and photographs, including several of Damien as a child that he had forgotten existed. In one, he was maybe 8 years old, grinning at the camera with a gap-toothed smile while holding a toy airplane. You wanted to be a pilot, Helen said, noticing him looking at the photo. You talked about it constantly. Then your father left, and you stopped talking about dreams altogether. I became practical instead. You became hard. Helen handed him tea in a chipped mug. I watched you build walls so high that even I couldn't reach you anymore. Damien set down the tea, his hands trembling slightly. I thought I was protecting myself. Protecting you. If I was powerful enough, rich enough, nobody could hurt us the way Dad did, oh sweetheart. Helen sat beside him, taking his hand. Your father didn't leave because we weren't enough. He left because he was broken inside and didn't know how to fix himself. You spent 20 years trying to prove you weren't like him, and in the process, you became something worse, someone who hurt others the way he hurt us. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. I know, Damien whispered. Mom, I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people. I don't know if I can fix it all. You can't fix everything, but you can start making different choices. Helen squeezed his hand. What changed? Why are you here now? Damien told her everything. About the collapse, about Grace and her kindness, about meeting Thomas Winters and seeing the real cost of his decisions, about the kids at the community center and the board meeting and the terrifying decision to change everything. When he finished, Helen was crying. I'm so proud of you, she said. Not for being successful or powerful. I'm proud because you found your way back to being human.
Nate.
I'm scared, Damien admitted. What if Hayes is right? What if I fail? What if trying to be good means losing everything? Then you'll still have what matters most, true integrity, and the people who love you.
Helen
smiled through her tears. That's more than your father ever had. More than you've had for a long time. They spent the afternoon talking. Really talking for the first time in years. Helen told him about her life at the library, about the children she helped with reading programs, about the quiet contentment she had found in simple things. Will you come to dinner next week? Damien asked as he was leaving. There's someone I want you to meet. It's a woman who started all this change? Grace. Her name is Grace. Helen hugged him tightly. I can't wait to meet her. The foundation over the next month. Damien threw himself into his transformation with the same intensity he had once brought to hostile takeovers. But instead of destroying companies, he worked to rebuild them. He met with David Park, a young entrepreneur whose startup had been crushed by Cross Technologies 3 years ago. David was working as a software developer now, his dreams of running his own company abandoned. Why are you here? David asked warily when Damien showed up at his office. To apologize and to offer you something? Damien handed him a folder. I want to fund your startup. Full financing, no strings attached except one condition: you maintain ethical employment practices. David stared at the documents in disbelief. This is $2 million. Consider it repayment with interest for what I took from you. I don't understand. Why? Because I'm trying to become someone my mother can be proud of. Someone I can look at in the mirror without hating. Damien met the younger man's suspicious gaze. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make things right going forward. David studied him for a long moment. I heard you had some kind of breakdown. More like a breakthrough. So what do you say? Will you let me help rebuild what I destroyed? It took 2 more meetings and a conversation with David's wife before he agreed. But when he finally signed the papers, tears streaming down his face. Damien felt something unfamiliar, genuine joy at someone else's happiness. He met with Jenny Rodriguez next, the single mother from Winters Manufacturing. She was exhausted, juggling 3 jobs and raising 2 teenagers alone. Damien offered her a position at Cross Technologies with a salary that would let her quit the other jobs, plus a college fund for her kids. Why would you help me? Jenny asked, suspicious and hopeful at the same time. Because you shouldn't have to work 3 jobs just to survive. Because I made decisions that hurt you without ever considering the consequences. Because I'm trying to do better. One by one, Damien reached out to the people his company had harmed. Some refused to speak to him. Others accepted his help but couldn't forgive. A few, like David and Jenny, cautiously gave him a second chance. Through it all, Grace was there. She helped him navigate difficult conversations, reminded him to actually listen instead of trying to fix everything immediately, and challenged him when he slipped back into old patterns of control. You can't just throw money at problems, she said one evening at the community center where Damien now volunteered 3 times a week. Sometimes people need to be heard more than they need to be helped. I'm learning that, Damien said, watching Marcus show off his science project to other kids. Slowly, you're doing better than you think. Grace sat beside him. Do you know what Patricia told me yesterday? She said the old Damien Cross would have donated money and never shown up again. The new Damien shows up, learns kids' names, and actually cares about their lives. The new Damien, he repeated. Is that who I am now? I think you're still figuring that out. But you're heading in a good direction. Damien took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. I just helped you find what was already there. Grace smiled. Besides, you're not done yet. What do you mean? There's someone else you need to make amends with. Someone who deserves to see how much you've changed. Full circle, Thomas Winters agreed to meet Damien at a coffee shop near his small apartment. The older man looked better than he had at the hospital, stronger, more settled, but his eyes were still guarded. Grace said you wanted to talk, Thomas said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. I wanted to show you something. Damien pulled out a folder. This is the paperwork for the Winters Foundation. It's funded with $50 million from my personal assets. And its mission is to help family-owned businesses survive during economic hardship. Thomas opened the folder slowly, reading through the documents. There's more, Damien continued. I've purchased the patents that used to belong to Winters Manufacturing. I'm giving them back to you along with enough capital to restart the company if you want. Or you can sell them. The choice is entirely yours. Why? Thomas's voice was rough with emotion. Because I can't give you back the 3 years I took from you. I can't undo the pain I caused. But I can try to make the future different. Damien met the older man's eyes. I understand if you can't forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that meeting you changed my life. You and Grace showed me that there's a better way to live. Thomas was silent for a long time, staring at the papers in his hands. When he finally looked up, there were tears on his cheeks. I spent 2 years hating you, he said quietly. It ate me alive. Grace kept telling me that hate was poisoning me, that I needed to let it go. I couldn't understand how she could be so compassionate toward the man who destroyed our lives. He wiped his eyes. Now, I see what she saw. Someone who was lost, but trying to find his way home. Am I forgiven? Damien asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a process. But yes, I can start forgiving you. Thomas extended his hand across the table. Thank you for this. For all of it, when they shook hands, Damien felt the last piece of ice around his heart finally melt away. The new beginning 6 months after his collapse, Damien stood at the front of a conference room filled with journalists, board members, and representatives from companies Cross Technologies had once destroyed and was now helping rebuild. The transformation hadn't been easy. The company's profits had initially dropped as they invested in people rather than pure acquisition. Hayes had loudly predicted failure. Several major shareholders had bailed. But slowly, something remarkable happened. Companies they partnered with began to thrive. Employee retention rates soared. Innovation accelerated. And Cross Technologies' reputation shifted from corporate raider to ethical industry leader. The financial press called it the Cross Miracle. Damien called it finally getting it right. "Thank you all for coming," Damien said, his voice steady and genuine. 6 months ago, I stood in front of this company's board and proposed something radical: that we could be successful without being ruthless, that we could profit without causing suffering, that compassion and business could coexist. Click to a slide showing statistics, job creation numbers, company growth rates, employee satisfaction scores. The data speaks for itself. But more importantly, I want you to meet some people who represent what this transformation really means. David Park stood and talked about how his reborn startup was now employing 15 people. Jenny Rodriguez spoke about finally being able to have dinner with her kids every night. Marcus from the community center, wearing his best clothes, showed off the scholarship he had received to a prestigious science summer camp. And Thomas Winters announced that he was reopening Winters Manufacturing with Damien as a silent partner, creating jobs for many of his original employees. "I won't lie and say this has been easy," Damien concluded. "Changing everything about how you operate, admitting you were wrong, facing the people you heard, tits, been the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's also been the most rewarding." Found Grace in the audience, and she smiled at him with pride. "Someone once told me that everyone deserves kindness, even people who forget how to show it to others. That kindness saved my life and showed me a better path. Now it's Cross Technologies' mission to pay that kindness forward." The applause was genuine and warm. So different from the polite golf claps he used to receive after announcing record-breaking acquisitions.